Hello everyone, Grim here, and as you can probably tell, it's time for another narration. This one is titled, My Wife Found Something Strange While We Were Camping, and She Refuses to Put It Down. Written by the user JamFranz, posted to the subreddit r/no sleep. Sit back, relax, and let's begin. Apologies in advance for any typos or grammatical errors. I am typing this on my phone with my non-dominant hand. Everything happened recently, so it's still vivid in my mind. My wife, Valen, had never been camping before, and we decided to go together for our 5-year wedding anniversary. It probably doesn't sound like the most glorious vacation for an anniversary, but we love the outdoors, and we figured it would be a great break from the indoor disco. The first couple of days we hiked, watched the stars, and relaxed together. We live in the middle of the city, so we enjoyed seeing the tall blue spruces, the mountain, and smelling the fresh air. It was a perfect trip. Things started going downhill today. The day before we planned on leaving. We decided to start our hike on a trail we had walked before and immensely enjoyed, planning to take a different fork this time. We were taking in the sights. We had started discussing moving out of the city so we could do things like this more often. We both worked from home, so it was a very real possibility, and we were engrossed in our conversation on the logistics of such a move that it took us about 20 minutes to realize we hadn't hit the fork in the trail yet. That didn't seem right, so I pulled up the picture of the trail map I'd taken on my phone. According to the map, we should have reached it already. The trail we were supposed to be on split into a Y shape, so it would have been hard to miss. Instead, this trail continued straight on. It had been a couple of days since our first trek on the trail, so we figured we just got disoriented and ended up on a different trail. It was a pleasant walk, and seemed straightforward enough, so we figured we'd keep on going. Could easily find our way back. We kept going, taking in the sights, enjoying the soft breeze and the smell of the pines it brought with it. We walked on in silence, listening to the rustling of the wind in the trees and the occasional sound of small animals stepping through the fallen pine needles. We eventually heard rushing water and came to a small stream. It wasn't very wide, less than 4 feet. The way the water moved, yes, it was likely deeper than it looked. I dropped a small rock in out of curiosity. It was whisked straight down and away much faster than one would have guessed based on its appearance. Ella nudged me. She pointed to the paper map from the park and pointed out that the stream didn't show up on the map at all. We wondered if we had accidentally left the boundaries of the park. The trail looked well worn and safe. It wasn't as if we were wandering off into uncharted wilderness. So, we decided to continue on and hoped we weren't trespassing. Due to the width of the stream, I just stepped over and put my hand out to help Fallon. But by the time I turned to where she had been standing, she had already cleared the distance in a graceful jump. Show off, I teased. She stuck out her tongue at me. We were fascinated by the sudden change in our surroundings on that side of the stream. The forest had taken on a new look. The trees were taller, closer together. They were older looking. As the density and height of the trees increased, the amount of light seeping through the canopy decreased immensely. Still, the trail continued on. I don't remember when the silence began. Was it after the stream or before? I only noticed it when the light mist set in and Fallon disappeared. I jumped. She had snuck up behind me and whispered in my ear, "This would be the perfect setting for someone to pop up out of the woods and drag us away screaming." I laughed. Yeah, that'd make for one hell of an anniversary. It was only after we stopped talking and the silence stood in stark contrast that I realized we hadn't heard a single sound other than our own steps and breathing in a while. We eventually came to a clearing where there was no trees, no grass, just a small lake surrounded by dark soil. The difference in light between the dark, shadowed forest and the bright clearing had us blinking at the sudden return of the sun. The lake looked more like a crater in the black soil than water until a gentle breeze created waves. The water was so dark, but even more oddly, there was no reflection. Fallon, who was terrified of deep water, inhaled sharply and stepped backwards instinctively. I hadn't seen anything like it before, and I wanted to take a picture. I wanted to look online when we got home and see where we'd ended up. It was fascinating. There weren't any footsteps, human or otherwise, in the soil besides ours. I pulled up my phone and immediately dropped it on the ground. In the brief amount of time it took for me to bend down to retrieve it, wipe the black soil off the screen and lens, and then stand back up, something in the atmosphere had shifted. The air was colder, and it was darker in the clearing. The sky had become cloudier. It had almost a greenish hue to it. The water was moving. Ripples emanated from the middle as something disrupted the otherwise calm water. Whatever it was coming up from under the surface. Something in me knew whatever was coming out of there was not something we should stick around and see. I backed away, my mouth set in a grim line, as I turned around to see if Fallon was seeing the same thing and that I wasn't imagining it. She was staring at the lake as well, but with an expression I couldn't quite place at the time. Looking back at it now, I think adoration describes it best. Something almost human-shaped, but with long and thin, spindly appendages, was coming from the water. It was matte black and almost difficult to distinguish from the water and soil in the low light, until it hauled itself further and began to crawl. I didn't know what it was, but my prey instincts told me I didn't want to be here when it fully emerged to find out. The non-rightness of it had my skin crawling. I reached for Fallon's hand, but it slipped through my fingers. She was jogging towards it before I realized what was happening. And then my wife did something that shocked me. She reached down, helped it the remaining way out of the water to its feet. She began talking to it quickly, excitedly, and leading it towards me. My brain was still trying to process the turn of events. I wasn't entirely sure what I was seeing. If I had been alone, I would have bolted in the opposite direction, but I couldn't leave her. I stood frozen in place, poised to dart forward and grab her away from it. She was holding on to it. Fallon had draped one of its long, thin appendages over her shoulder. She approached, holding it as if it were an injured hiking partner. "Jordan," she said with eyes misty, "this is my roommate, Katie, from college." She patted it on what would have been the shoulder had it been entirely human shaped. "Katie, it's been so long," she gestured towards me. "This is my husband, Jordan." I stood there dumbfounded. I was frozen, my stomach heavy with a sort of fear I can't describe, other than the feeling of seeing something human eyes were probably not meant to see. "I feel like you don't need me to tell you this, but I just want to confirm to you that there was no way in hell that thing was Katie. I had met Katie before, and she was an actual living human being. We were even friends on Instagram. According to her recently posted pictures, she was living in Cape Cod, not visiting the bottom of a lake in the middle of nowhere several states away." When my brain and my mouth finally started to work again, all I could bring myself to say was, honey, I don't think that's..." But before I could think of how to even finish that sentence, I noticed that where the thing rested on her shoulder, the delineation of where her arms and shoulders ended and its body began seemed less crisp somehow. I hoped it was a trick of the light, but the observation stirred me out of my stupor. I became more insistent. "Fallon, I need you to get away from that, please. I don't know what you're seeing, but it isn't Katie." I said as calmly as I could. I thought that maybe if I reasoned with her, it'd snap her out of whatever delusion she was trapped in. "Please, remember where we are. Why would she be out here? Why would she crawl out of the lake?" She looked at me, indigent. "You want me to leave her here? On her own? Injured?" I had to rack my brain a bit, but then I did recall a story about how Katie injured her leg in what was to be the first and last time the two of them went skiing. Fallon had helped her get to the lodge. This had been years and years ago, long before we were even dating. Was she reliving this moment? I didn't know what to do. She was latched onto that thing like it was her best friend. Literally. She looked at me with that fiery determination in her golden eyes that I usually loved about her, but in this case, had me worried for her life. "All right," I eventually said, wearily. It hadn't attacked her or really moved at all since it emerged, and I wanted to get us far away from this lake as soon as possible before anything else crawled out of it. I didn't see any choice but to continue back the way we came. I led us back along the path to the stream, glancing over my shoulders every so often at her and the thing. She was having a one-sided conversation with it about a different friend, laughing as if it had told her a joke. When she caught me staring, she narrowed her eyes at me. I tried to see what she was seeing, but I couldn't. When we reached the stream, after about 15 minutes, I stepped across it, same as before. I turned to Fallon, unsure of what to do. She had stopped and was staring at me. Against my better judgment, I held out my hand. "Fallon, I'll get her across so you can jump," I whispered. She ignored me and instead she continued on, putting one foot into the stream as if she didn't see it there at all. Luckily, it seemed to surprise her because she jolted back before she could have put her full weight onto it and fallen in. She stumbled back, as if surprised, shook her head like she was trying to awaken from a daydream. What? Her annoyed look had instantly changed to one of confusion. What's happening? How did we get back here already? Where's Katie? The confusion quickly gave way to fear. The blood drained from her face. She had turned her head and seemed to be seeing the thing draped over her shoulder for what it was now. She was just now feeling the primal terror I had felt when I saw it emerge from the water. She was trying to push it off her violently. She was panicking, struggling, screaming, shattering the silence. I can't get it off! Her eyes pleaded with me. I jumped back over to help. Jordan, please, she begged, her voice hoarse from screaming. I tried to help pull the thing off her, but wherever she had touched it, it was as if it had absorbed her into its own body. My breathing was frantic. I was trying to tell her it would be okay, telling her to stay calm, while clearly not doing the same thing myself. Suddenly, she started slowly moving away from me. Her eyes were full of confusion and fear. The thing, now that it was attached to her fully, had begun to move away from me, slowly dragging her with it. Our eyes met as we realized it was taking her back to where it came from, towards the dark water. I grabbed her hand and pulled her towards me, putting all of my weight into it. For as thin and spindly as it was, it still managed to pull her strongly in the opposite direction. Please, Jordan, she sobbed, her voice cracking. Please, please don't let it take me. Suddenly the thing relented a bit. Without its resistance, I fell backwards into the water. All three of us were yanked by the force of my fall and the current. I watched hopelessly as she struggled to stay above water. I'll never forget the look on her face, one of abject terror. As the thing pushed me away from her, she was swept away. I finally caught on to something along the shore and managed to pull myself out. I was coughing up water. I wasn't sure where I was. My phone was soaked, the maps were gone, but my first thought was Felon. I ran, screaming her name as dusk began to settle. Somehow I found her. She was sitting against the tree, hugging herself, her eyes wide with shock. But to my immense relief, she was alive and the thing was gone. She looked like her normal self, albeit traumatized a bit. I held her, told her we were okay. We were going to be okay. We'd made it. We decided to head straight to the car and leave, rather than wander around in the dying light trying to find our campsite. We'd come back for our gear later. We walked back towards the car, her hand in mine. But the thing is, now I can't let go of her hand. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different at the end of this one, make it a little bit more personal. I firstly want to thank everyone for listening, especially those who made it all the way through. You guys are the best. Thank you to my 39 subscribers. I know I'm not even a big channel, but I appreciate each and every one of you. But yeah, have yourself a good night and a good day, and hopefully I'll see you for the next video.